So today, me and a couple friends are going over what would happen if Sakura were to fight Delta in the Boruto anime slash manga. We use both canons in this video. If you've been subscribed to me for a long time, you'll recognize one of the people in the video. His name is Spencer. We've done a lot of videos together in the past, but they're all like kind of removed now. Another person in the video, his name is Troy. He uploads a lot of my debates and he's starting to get into actual content as well, so definitely check them out in the description. This part right here is actually having to be re-recorded. We recorded an intro earlier, but there was some audio issues, so I'm having to re-record it myself. So I'm just gonna summarize what we talked about in the very beginning. We were just talking about the narrative of Sakura and how her narrative is essentially to at first be behind Naruto and Sasuke and want her to try her hardest to catch up to them. And then we finally see her start to do that in the war arc where it says, you know, she finally caught up to those two in reference to Master KCM1 Naruto and EMS Sasuke. And then there's another statement that says she won't fall behind even when working in collaboration with them, referencing when she punched Kaguya. There's another statement from the last data book that says whenever she rushed toward Madara, she was no inferior to either Naruto and Sasuke. I did give the alternate interpretation that that is just talking about resolve in the Madara instance, because it's the entire context of the scene, but we were trying to say that while that might be the context of that scene, it still was Sakura's overall narrative to catch up to Naruto and Sasuke at that point. So now it'll cut back to the original video and, you know, you'll hear Troy and Spencer giving their reasons for Sakura and Delta. To touch on what Spencer just said, where he talked about how in the last it stated that when she rushed at Madara, she was not inferior to Naruto or Sasuke. You could say that this is also in reference to not being inferior in terms of not being scared of Madara, because the entire context behind the scene is Sakura is scared of Madara and backing away from him, and Naruto and Sasuke are standing there like ready to fight. And then she rushes at him, obviously showing she's not inferior to either of them. But what Spencer is trying to get across is it's also part of her narrative that she catches up to both of them in power so that she can save them like they save her. As well as the two interpretations not being mutually exclusive. It's just how Sakura is. We felt it was necessary to kind of go into Sakura's healing and Byakugo state first because it's fairly brief. We get the explanation for it very early in part 1 with Tsunade, and it kind of just stays the same throughout the entire series. From what she says directly to Orochimaru during the three-way deadlock, she says, "It's just I've been storing chakra in my forehead for many years. With such a large amount of chakra, I can stimulate all proteins in my body and accelerate cell division to rebuild them. I can regenerate organs and limbs. It's not a recovery ability, it's regeneration. I cannot die now." And then Shizune comments on the downsides of this ability, and she says, "But the number of cell divisions in one's lifetime is predetermined. Speeding up cell division means shortening a lifespan." So
can I cut in? Because we actually see this happen, right? There's such thing as the Hayflick limit. If you don't know, the Hayflick limit is the biological limit to which cells can divide, right? Because cell division is a form of mutation, and whenever the source genome is cut off, right, they can no longer divide. Those mutations will become harmful to the body. There's a theory, or I think Matt Pat made the theory about this is what's poisoning Wolverine and Logan, the movie. But we see this in the Sakura novel, where she actually takes this as an offensive ability, and she keeps destroying and then regenerating this person, i.e. Kido, in this fight, to the point where he can no longer regenerate, even though he has QB regeneration. So the Hayflick limit is very real. It applies to anyone who can regenerate, including Naruto, or anyone who is regenerating cells or dividing cells in order to make new ones. But this would not be the case of wholly new cell growth.
You could also make the case that this is why Hashirama died at what was seemingly a young age, because it stated his healing ability is similar to Tsunade's. This is likely a cause of his death, although we never get an inverse reason as to why he died. To go over Sakura's fight with Shin briefly, I'll let Spencer cover most of this. I'll just give my opinion on the fight. I think that in the anime version at least, the second fight definitely demonstrates that Shin is superior to Sakura, and that in the first encounter they had, it was very clear he was just caught off guard.
So I actually agree in the anime rendition. What's really important is there's a large difference between the anime and manga versions of what happens, right? In the manga, the only time they truly have a fight, it's not even a fight. Sakura blitzes him. He gets his kidney broken, or maybe it's his liver, and then it has to be taken out of a Shin kid. But in the anime, this is far different. We see a much more prolonged fight outside of Shin's lab, one in which Sakura is clearly at a disadvantage in taijutsu, or not even in taijutsu, but due to Shin's Mangekyo Sharingan ability, which I think is very telling, because we see this overwhelming speed blitz, and then we see something that isn't representative of that. It seems almost as though Sakura was using body flicker in the first instance and can't replicate this feat in another instance. Maybe that's just an odd interpretation of mine, but I feel that that's the most consistent from what we've seen.
There's also getting into if, based off the Shin fight and the speed blitz or whatever, if she actually scales to Naruto and Sasuke. The issue I have with this, and I'm pretty sure Spencer and Troy agree with me, is that Shin only fights Naruto and Sasuke when they're low on power in a way, right? So Sasuke doesn't have his ocular jutsu, which we see in the Kaguya fight and directly after the Shin fight, he says nerfs him. And Naruto is rusty from not being in combat often. I touched on Naruto being rusty if it means he's weaker in my last video. If you do think it means he's weaker, then Sakura just doesn't scale to him. And if you don't think that and you go with the one I brought up in the last video, it doesn't mean Shin scales to Naruto either, because of a few other things.
Another thing I want to is that it's, specifically when we're talking about Sasuke, not only does he have to protect people like Sarada, but it's also specifically stated that he can't use his visual powers, so he can't use shit like Susanoo or even his EMS. He has the base Tomo Sharingan and base Rinnegan.
This next part will be the last thing we really bring up for Sakura, and it's pretty relevant to the Delta section of the video. So it's if she even is the strongest kunoichi in the...
Oop, excuse me. I'd actually like to object, because Delta's not a kunoichi. But, anywho.
So Delta's not a kunoichi, but it's pretty important because we actually get a statement from Shikamaru in the Boruto manga that the 5 Kage in Boruto are the village's maximum power they have against Momoshiki, which would obviously mean that the 5 Kage plus Boruto is a team that's better than, you know, with Sakura up there, right? So all the Kage should be stronger than Boruto, which would actually make, to our knowledge anyway, Kuretsuchi the strongest kunoichi in Boruto. Yeah. Because she'd be stronger than Sakura.
Is it okay if I address like a common counter argument to that?
Of course.
Yeah.
A lot of people use this argument, and even I've used it myself whenever I'm debating some random. People will say, okay, well, Sakura is off healing the village, she's low on chakra. But Sakura's chakra supply is massive. It's directly stated she's a better medical nin than Tsunade. Tsunade can just summon Katsuyu to heal the entire village from Pain's invasion. The idea that, like, healing the village, or especially the only person we see her heal is Hinata, the idea that healing Hinata alone nerfs her to such an extent where the Byakugo can't replenish her is absurd. Like, that's such a lousy counter argument, in my opinion.
Yeah. There's also another thing people like to bring up, and they like to ask the question, well, why did they bring Boruto? Boruto's obviously weaker than Sakura. Even if you were to say Boruto is weaker than Sakura, it's like, not only does his have context, Sasuke is trying to teach him like this lesson, trying to help him find his ninja way and all of that. It's also like plot named after Boruto. Like, he has to be there anyway. So you can't even bring that up as like a refutation or a defeater to the argument.
Yeah, so just to wrap up Sakura scaling or her section or whatever, she's just like vaguely below 5 Kage level. So she wouldn't even scale to people like Fuse Momo or maybe even Base Momo. But yeah, we'll just get
I would like to add one more thing before we move on. Some people are gonna be like, oh well, what about the scene where, like, Shikamaru holds down the 5 Kage and Naruto goes into QB and just negs him? This is a significantly stronger Naruto. After the Shin fight, Naruto dedicates himself to training his QB mode and training the guards of the Leaf Village in their barrier jutsu. We actually see this in Boruto episode 38. Naruto will, like, go all out in QB mode. He actually speaks to Kurama about, like, hey, time to get going, time to put some work in, right? And we see that he's training these barrier shinobi. These shinobi are the ones that trap Kawaki and the rest of Team 7 in Naruto's residence.
But another way to think about it is, like, if you think Naruto and Sasuke are equals, and how Sasuke has to, like, train his Rinnegan so the chakra fatigue won't be as much when he's traveling dimensions. It's like, well, if they are already equals and Sasuke trains, Naruto would have to train to stay equals, like they've been shown throughout the series, like versus Jigen fuse Momo.
So
Anyways,
we'll just leave
on
the
to
Sakura
Delta.
section there. We'll get into Delta. Our whole thing with Delta is Delta's narrative is kind of just power scaling. Like Delta just says herself, she's built to just destroy things, right? So power scaling Delta is sort of just like the whole point of her, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And we think Delta is sort of just like a better Sakura in general.
It hurts me to say, but Delta is a monster in every category where Sakura is a monster, right?
Yeah, like
She's a beast.
So,
Like,
so if we talk about Sakura's healing, Delta just blatantly has better healing. So the downside to Sakura's healing is the fact that, you know, you only have so many cell divisions per lifetime, right? So when you keep splitting and regenerating cells, like Spencer went over, you'll eventually just die. It shortens your lifespan. Delta's regeneration just makes new cells from whatever is destroyed. So it's literally just the Byakugo but better. The only issue is Delta doesn't have like a massive chakra reserve to draw from like Sakura does, but that doesn't even really matter in the first place because, I mean, we'll just get into why Delta is stronger than Byakugo Sakura.
before we move
Now,
on, like people like to get on the scientific ninja tools and call them like fodder and shit. But the whole reason for them is to make normal shinobi and shit like that the level of Otsutsuki's, and so they can battle off them alone without like Naruto and Sasuke. That's just to give them an edge over everyone else. So they kind of have to be broken.
not even normal shinobi. The point is to give normal people
even normal
shinobi
people.
level power, right?
Yeah. Like Boruto's unable to use purple lightning and then he just pops one and destroys Shinki's like iron sand in the anime.
He
So-
just one shots him when he
Yeah.
can take like fireballs and all of that.
So before we get into like Delta's real scaling, I guess we could just go over this code statement. I haven't seen the anime for this and what he says there, but it's stated in the Borokora and as well as in the manga. Delta's talking after her fight with Naruto and she's saying, you know, I'm gonna kill the Hokage. He beat me up, blah blah blah. She's you know, she's furious, rightfully so. She just got her ass whooped. And Code says you're clearly no match for him, thus it's inevitably going to be up to me and Boro, which would obviously imply that him and Boro are stronger than Delta. So my issue with this, Troy has his own, Spencer has his own with the other statements. My issue with this one is we don't know if Code has ever seen Delta go all out. So Delta actually has a few different fighting styles, and even when she's willing to kill someone, she doesn't necessarily go all out. So she tells Naruto, like, you annoy me, I'm gonna kill you now. And then she rushes at him. This is based on Naruto, at least in the manga. She rushes at him and she uses a fighting style primarily based on kicks, right? She's only kicking, she's not punching. And then Naruto, like, he's dodging all of her shit and he just slams her into the ground. And then when Delta says, you know, I'm gonna go all out, Naruto says he's gonna go all out. Her fighting style switches. She's using a lot more taijutsu than just kicks. And she's obviously contending with and going all out 6-pass Sage mode Naruto. The issue people normally have with Naruto going all out or Delta scaling to Naruto is the Kawaki statements, where Kawaki either says that Naruto just completely surpasses Delta, which is cool, right? I'm just saying Delta scales near him, not that she's as strong as him completely. Or Naruto says at the end, it would have been easier if I was just going to kill her. I think that Naruto saying it would be easier if I was trying to kill her is very clearly in reference to his Rasengan, because he had to output a large amount of chakra in order to get that done. And we see even in the fight with Delta, Naruto starts to get fatigued when they're just doing their little taijutsu exchanges. And outputting a large amount of chakra actually damages your chakra network, which is directly linked to your organs. So when you do that, Naruto's essentially like hurting his own organs, putting out all this chakra to shut down Delta or overload Delta.
So one of my major issues with that Kawaki statement is what Kawaki's specifically talking about is Naruto's ability to control the pace and flow of the battle. He's saying, man, Naruto's a goat. He's like leading Delta around, even though Delta is relative to him in taijutsu. He's basically saying Naruto's battle like he was higher, because he can dance Delta around this battlefield to make sure that any damage done doesn't come towards Himawari or Kawaki or Boruto. Which is like, I guess that's a battle IQ feat for Naruto.
To add on to what Spencer's saying, what even supports this? Because you can like not only argue that battle IQ shit, but how he's just a better fighter, or he could just be a better fighter than Delta. Because Kawaki also states like, Boruto, don't intervene. You'll be getting in the way of them going all out. Like, just telling Boruto that they're using their maximum speed and AP.
So, Spencer, do you want to get into the war potential statement?
There's a statement that comes from one of the Borkara around the time or just after the Delta fight. It talks about how in a war between Konoha and Kara, there would be certain key members, and it analyzes their quote-unquote war potential. The war potential is meant to be battle strength. They talk about how the war potential of Kara is predicted to be similar to the Hokage Naruto. This is saying Kara as a whole at the time of chapter 36, so no Victor, right? No Deepa, none of the fodder, right? You're talking about Boro, you're talking about Delta, you're talking about Code, you're talking about Koji, you're talking about Jigen. They're saying that these individuals have an overall battle and attack strategy in command of battle that is relative to Naruto's. Not that each one of them can go blow for blow with Naruto. Because that's blatantly shown to not be the case. Not to mention it's just a prediction, but...
Yes.
I want to like briefly go back to the original statement that Code makes. The exact wording is, "You are clearly no match for him. Thus, it's inevitably going to be up to me or Boro." I have two other interpretations that seem to make more sense. Given how in the manga and anime, it's clearly shown that Boruto, even with his karma, is way inferior to even like base Naruto, let alone his 6-pass Sage mode. The first thing they can be talking about is Boro's poison. It works like a virus and like attacks the organs and things like that. He can use that against Naruto because his durability, speed, and AP don't seem to be anything that good. Because Boruto can tank his blows and damage him, blasting off body parts, which he cannot do the same as Naruto. And they can react.
In the anime, Kawaki was cutting off his arms, bro.
And
Like,
even in the anime, we get Kawaki versus Naruto, and Kawaki uses his like rage beam straight up in Naruto's face, and it doesn't even damage him, whereas it blows off Boro's body. So can't be talking about AP or speed. But the other interpretation is like, okay, she lost. He can literally just be saying that by inevitably going to be up to me or Boro, that they are gonna have to fight him, like no matter what, since Delta already had their chance. Doesn't even have to be like any relativity shit.
Really, the last thing for Delta we need to get into is if Naruto has a better form, because Delta's only hacks are really her regeneration and the beams that neg regeneration, which is also another way to just fuck over Sakura. Because if those beams land, Sakura literally can't use her best healing.
She just dies.
Me and Troy first encountered this argument of Naruto has different forms and he's in a lower one against Delta. Naruto does not have different forms. Especially if you go by anime canon, there is no different form between Naruto versus Momoshiki and Naruto versus Delta. It's just Delta scales to Naruto, as hard as that is for some people to accept. But Troy, I'll let you talk about why there is no difference.
So if y'all were to say that there were different forms, then we would run into a lot of issues, such as the issue of versus Jigen, where Naruto and Sasuke are getting like beat up badly. And we know they're not retarded fighters, right? We already established earlier in the video that Naruto has a pretty good battle IQ. So if he were to use this bad form or this trash form, not only in the Delta fight would he be putting his kids in the village that he like works himself half to death to protect every day in danger, but he would also be putting his like best friend Sasuke and himself in danger by like purposefully weakening himself. In the anime, you see they're the same forms, but in the manga, you can probably argue some design changes or something like that. Also in the anime and manga, when he puts on a Hokage cloak, it seems to change his design completely, especially in the anime.
Yeah. In the anime, it's just much more blatant. So it's actually shown against Sarada that when Sakura and Sarada are actually punching you, they let out the chakra in their hand before the punch actually lands, because Sakura and Sarada are doing a clash and their fists aren't touching, but they're clashing, right? So it's possible Delta would just absorb that. We could see a counter to this being, can Delta see chakra? Well, yeah, because she can see the invisible Rasengan that Momoshiki and Sasuke's Rinnegan can't see. So, I mean, it's possible she has better visual prowess than the Rinnegan and Byakugan, but I mean, this could just be a quality of her eye, so.
People also like to bring up how Sakura usually damages the environment to like throw her opponents like off their shit, off their game. Like especially with the Ten Tails clone, how she crushed all the ground and caused all of them to fall. But Delta can fly and she has ranged attacks, so she is literally just a hard counter to Sakura in every way.
Yeah. So to wrap this up completely, we obviously all agree that if Sakura was in Naruto's position, the writers would likely, for entertainment and for the sake of keeping the Leaf safe, make it to where Sakura would win. But we think just with the information that's already presented to us, and since a situation like that has not arisen, that Delta comes out on top in the fight.
Yeah, we need more Delta respect. People be sleeping on it because they hate on it.
Subscribe to Troy. Troy uploads all the debates that I don't. I used to upload debates on my channel, but I don't do it anymore because I don't debate as often. Subscribe to Spencer. I'm going to do a video with him soon on Madara versus Julius. So
it's gonna be goated.
Cool. That should be pretty cool. And me and Troy are gonna do Momoshiki versus Delta pretty soon. That's all.
Yeah.
So we'll see you guys later.